your email and advise you if I think it's reportable or not. But I do want to point out that information we have now, it could be a little bit different 3 months or 6 months or a year from now. FinCEN may change the rules a little bit or become a little clearer on their rules. But I can tell you today what we know as of today. So this new rule is going to require us to reporting on certain real estate transactions if they involve a residence, if they're non-financed, if the transferee is a trust or an entity. So it's basically 3 things. Is it a residence? Is it non-financed? And is the transferee a trust or an entity? So what is residential real property? It does have sort of a broad definition. So real property, it's got to be located in the United States, containing a structure designed principally for occupation by 1 to 4 families. This can be a single family house, it can be a townhouse, it can be an apartment, it can be a condo, it can be a co-op, it can be mixed use. So it could have, say, for instance, a bakery on the bottom and 3 apartments on top or 4 apartments on top. It can be vacant land with an intent to build a residence. And residential real property includes property located in the U.S. territory and Indian lands. So it's going to be property in District of Columbia, Indian lands, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, American Samoa. Apartments. Is an apartment building a residence? Yes, if it's 1 to 4 families. So 4 units, anything above 4 units is not residential. But if it's got 1 to 4, then it's considered residential. So not reportable. What is vacant land? Okay. Vacant land is always going to depend on the intent of the transferee. If the transferee is going to build a residence, it's reportable. You get to believe, what he tells you. So if the transferee is not going to build a residence, it's not considered residential, and then it's not reportable. Again, you get to believe what he tells you. If the transferee is undecided about building a residence, it is not reportable. So if he says, I just don't know what I'm going to do with it, maybe down the road I'll build something. Okay, so he has no intent to build right now. It is not reportable. So what if a developer purchases multiple lots and intends eventually to build residential homes? Is it reportable? If that developer retains ownership and hires a builder to build the homes, it's considered residential and would be reportable. If the developer intends to sell to a builder down the road, then it's not considered residential and not reportable because he has no intent to build it himself. If the developer uses a transferee entity to purchase a large parcel with the intent to subdivide and build a community of single-family homes, is that reportable? Yes. At the time of the transfer, the developer intends to build at least 1 structure on the property. Therefore, the parcel of land meets the definition of residential. What about other types of property? What about a timeshare? Well, that's going to depend. If the ownership interest is transferred by a deed, or in the case of a co-op through stock shares, then it's considered a transfer of residential real property. If the transfer is an interest of an assignment of the contract, which is what I usually see, that's not considered a transfer of residential real property. So it would not be reportable. What about a mobile home? Is it permanently attached to the land and taxed as real estate? So affixed manufactured homes are considered residential real property and are reportable in non-finance transfers to entities or trust. If not affixed, so if they're like on a trailer or something, they're considered personal property and not residential property, so not reportable. Now, in 1976, HUD came up with the designation. Any mobile home before 1976 built, they're called mobile homes, and after 1976, they do call them manufactured homes. But the trick is to look and see if it's affixed. But if you see wheels underneath it or any sort of trailer or anything, it's not affixed. So what is a non-finance transfer? So a non-finance transfer of residential real property is a transfer that does not involve an extension of credit to all the transferees, and it's usually secured by the property and extended by a financial institution, subject to anti-money laundering programs and the requirement to do SAR, which is suspicious activity reporting obligations. So you know the national lenders that are out there, they all have to do those two things. They all have an anti-money laundering department, and they all fill out these suspicious activity reports. Transfers that are financed by a lender without an obligation to maintain an anti-money laundering program and the requirement to file these SARs are treated under the rule as non-finance transfers and must be reported if the other criteria is met, if it's residential and it is cash. Typically, that's your private lenders. That could be your hard money lender as well. We'll get into that in a little bit, but those are always going to be reportable. How about are partially financed transfers reportable? If one transferee secures financing, but not all, each transferee who did not get the financing would be reportable. And how do you know if the lender has an obligation to maintain an AML program and requirement to file a SAR? You can just go ahead and ask them. You can rely on the information they give you unless you have reason to suspect otherwise. Okay, but otherwise you can just go ahead and believe them. This AML program, the anti-money laundering program, as far as I know, that is a class that they take and they get a certificate. So a private lender can take the class and then they have to answer that they have an anti-money laundering department and that they file SAR reports. And as far as the, let's see, this one, the NMLS, what if there's a lender, but it's a private lender? If he has an NMLS number or an AML department, he does not need to be reported. You can just ask him, do you have the NMLS number? Or you can look it up yourself. That's public information. You can just go online and look and see if they have the NMLS number. But if they are a hard money lender or a private lender without that NMLS number or an AML department, it's going to be reported. What about the definition of an entity? What is an entity? A transferee trust is any person other than the transferee trust or individual, such as a corporation, a partnership, an association, an LLC. Those are all entities. And as far as a trust, a transferee trust is generally defined as any legal arrangement created when a person places assets under the control of a trustee for the benefit of one or more persons. And this is going to include family trusts. So what if the property is transferred to both an entity and a trust in the same sale or a gift? Both transferees are reported in the single report. And transfer of ownership for no consideration, such as a gift, these are reportable. So it's not always a sale, it is also a gift. Again, it's going to be residential property, cash only, to an entity or trust. So if you have those three situations in your transaction, then we're going to be looking at it to see if it's reportable. Now, with any rule, there's always exceptions, right? So FinCEN says, here we have a list of exceptions. You do not have to report if the transferee is on this list here. Transfers involving the court system. So anytime you have a situation where the court has been involved or somehow overseeing it, then FinCEN says, well, that's not suspicious to us because there's a court involved. So say you have a transfer in a bankruptcy estate or a transfer incident to a divorce. Husband and wife are getting divorced. The wife is awarded the home and the divorce. Husband signs a deed and transfers the property to a wife. That is not suspicious because the court oversaw it. Any sort of transfer supervised by a court, sometimes in probate, you'll have a probate court say, okay, so-and-so is going to be the successor trustee, and we're going to give him the power to sell the property at 123 Main Street. Again, supervised by a court, no reporting. Transfer resulting from the death of an individual, whether under a will or a trust or by operation of law, or even by contract. So for instance, say you have two joint owners, Bill and Sue, or joint tenants, Bill dies. By operation of law, the property transfers to Sue. Okay, so it's by operation of law. You do not have to report that. Transfers resulting from wills or trust, transfers on death deeds, you've seen those. Again, you don't have to report those. Transfers from beneficiary designations. So this exception was meant to include transfers governed by pre-existing legal documents, such as wills or trust, that generally involve the court system. So if somehow the court has touched this transaction or just oversees it in any way, that is not suspicious to FinCEN. And so they say you do not have to report that. That's an exception. Now here is a list of entities that are going to always be exempt from reporting. So these you don't have to report at all. Let me go through a couple of these. Number one, a securities reporting issuer. What is that? Well, that is a big corporation, multi-million-dollar corporation that is on the stock exchange. So think of like General Mills or Chevron or Kroger, any of those large million-dollar corporations on the stock exchange. You don't have to report them if they're the transferee entity. And the reason for that is because FinCEN says, you know what, they already report to us. They have to do these BOI reportings. We're already getting information from them. We don't need any more information. So that's good. Second one is governmental authority. So whenever you have a transferee entity that's the United States or a state or a political subdivision or a city, maybe the city of Laverne is buying a piece of residential property paying cash. You do not have to report them because this governmental authority governs them. And it also can be a city, it could also be an Indian tribe, any city, county. The next one, bank. Think of Wells Fargo, B of A, Chase, any bank like that, can even be a smaller bank. You don't have to report them. Credit union, again, you don't have to report them. Money services businesses, these are businesses that are check cashers, issuers of travelers' checks, money orders. They're also on the list, they're exempt. Broker dealer in securities. These brokers that buy and sell securities for other people's accounts. Think of Schwab, Edward Jones, Fidelity, companies like that. They already do reporting to FinCEN. So again, they're exempt. Who else is on here? Insurance companies, public utilities. A utility company providing one of the following services, like electricity, water, sewage, gas, telecommunications. Think of like San Diego Gas and Electric, PG&E, Verizon, any of those entities that supply public utilities, those are always going to be exempt. Let me see. So just think of it, I always think of if it's a big, large public company, has a multi-million-dollar business, they're pretty much already reporting to FinCEN. So they're usually going to be exempt. Now, obtaining information. Sometimes you have to ask. So for instance, the guy who's buying vacant land or the entity who's buying vacant land, you have to ask questions. So FinCEN is a little vague about obtaining information from the parties. FinCEN says, we'll ask the party to certify. So they have to send you something saying, yes, I certify, I'm going to, use the land to build a residence. Ask a private lender to certify. He has an AML department. So trust, but verify. And does FinCEN tell you what document to use? No, they do not. So you come up with your own. But again, it's certify. It doesn't say to notarize. It says certify. So here I've come up with some questions, and now I'm just going to go through these transactions, and you tell me if you think that this is going to be reportable or not. So here's the first question. Man is selling his property to an LLC, right, an entity, in a non-finance transaction, so it's cash. Property is a two-story building. On the bottom level, we have a gay bar and a tattoo parlor. On the second floor is 3 apartments. Is this transaction reportable to FinCEN? Well, first you have to answer to yourself, is this a commercial property or is it a residential property? Well, it's a mixed use transaction, right? But since the apartments are less than 4 units, it's considered residential and it is going to be reportable under FinCEN since it's being transferred to an entity and is non-financed. Here we go again. Question. Grandma is gifting her townhome to her chronically unemployed grandson who considers himself the next crypto king. Grandson, for tax purposes, he wants the property transferred into his newly created LLC called Crypto Slayer LLC. Grandma says this is a gift, it's not a sale, so it should not be reportable to FinCEN. Is Grandma correct? The answer is no. Grandma's a bit delusional, much like her grandson. For purposes of FinCEN, a gift is considered a non-financial transaction. That's already coming up for me. Question. Tiffany lives in a mobile home park. Tiffany is selling her 1966 mobile home for $10 to an entity called Elegant Homes LLC. The transferee is going to be paying cash. Is this transaction reportable? Answer, you first have to determine if the mobile home is a residence. Is it affixed to the ground? When you look at the picture here, you see wheels and you see a little trailer. So it's on a trailer, it is not affixed. So Tiffany's home is pre-1976, and it's also considered personal property. This would not be reportable. I do like that trailer though. Question. Man is selling his home located in Tortola, Virgin Islands at a non-finance transaction and it's transferred to an entity. Is this reportable to FinCEN? Okay. No, this is a trick question. Tortola is in the British Virgin Islands, not the US Virgin Islands. So the residence must be in the US or one of its territories. Question. An Indian tribe is transferring a house located on Indian land that will be held in a leasehold interest by a family trust. Okay. The family trust is paying cash for this leasehold interest. Is this reportable to FinCEN? You know, like out in Palm Springs, have you seen that? They do a lot of these leasehold interests with the tribes. Answer, yes, it is reportable, even if it's on Indian land and even if it's an Indian tribe, because the Indian tribe is not the transferee, the buyer, they're the seller, they're the transferor. Now, if the Indian tribe was buying the home for cash, it would not be reportable because they're an entity that's always excluded. Indian tribes are treated as a governmental entity and are exempt. But if they're selling land or doing those leasehold interests that they do to someone, that's going to be reportable. In most of these transactions, we're always going to be looking at the transferee, and that's the buyer. Questions. So Spirit Airlines is buying a very comfortable and luxurious 3-bedroom penthouse for its executives to use when they want to entertain or relax in the city. The penthouse has lots of legroom and is luxurious in every way possible. Spirit Airlines will be paying cash for this penthouse. Is this transaction reportable to FinCEN? No. Spirit Airlines, known for its poor customer service and cramped, uncomfortable travel, is a publicly traded company, and it's a securities reporting issuer and is exempt and not considered a transferee entity under FinCEN. Question. Your sister-in-law, Judy, who is a beauty school dropout, has decided to open a nail salon in the garage of her residence. For insurance purposes, Judy decides to transfer the title to her residence into an LLC. Judy prepares the deed herself, but has asked your title company as an accommodation to record the deed for her. If you record the deed, does the transaction become reportable? So If a title company steps in and records a deed as an accommodation, does it become reportable? So a transfer that does not involve a reporting person is not reportable. So, John and Sue Smith, who own their home, if they do their own deed, it is not reportable. But once a title company or escrow company steps into the transaction as an accommodation and records a deed for Judy, then a real estate professional has now become involved in the transaction and it becomes reportable. So people who are not real estate professionals, this FinCEN rule does not apply to them. They can record all the deeds they want and they don't have to report anything. But once a real estate professional steps into the transaction, then if the other criteria are met, meaning, is it a residence? Is it a cash deal? Is it an entity or a trust buying it? Then it could become reportable. So here we have an entity purchases a property at a trustee sale. Okay, so there was a foreclosure and a trustee sale. The foreclosing trustee records the trustee's deed upon sale. Is this transaction reportable to FinCEN? Well, when you have a foreclosure, you have someone who shows up and they pay cash, right? And they buy the property. So if it was a residence and you had someone show up and pay cash and they want the property put into say the name of an entity or a trust, is that going to be reportable? Well, the answer depends. Transfers that are supervised by a court are generally exempt from reporting and would include traditional judicial foreclosure sale conducted pursuant to a court order. So here in California, we are a non-judicial state. So our foreclosures are, we have a trustee who performs the foreclosure. We don't have to go to court and get permission. Like states like, say, Florida, for instance, if a homeowner there wants to do a foreclosure and kick out their tenant, they have to go to court. They have to file a lawsuit. They have to get permission, and they go through all the steps. And so that is court overseen, right? So that wouldn't be reportable. But here in California, we do non-judicial sales. The court is not involved at all. So yeah, that would not be overseen by a court. So it would probably be reportable. And you may be asking yourself, well, what's the difference between judicial and non-judicial? So the states that have the judicial foreclosures, when you look at their mortgages or their deed of trust, there's two parties, right? There's the borrower and the lender. But in California, when you look at our contracts, there's three parties. There's the borrower, there's the lender, and there's the foreclosing trustee. And right inside the deed of trust, the foreclosing trustee is given the power to do a foreclosure if there is a default. So we are considered a non-foreclosure state because our foreclosing trustees don't have to go to court and get permission. They can go ahead and record the notice of default and just go from there. So our foreclosures situations, if someone shows up at the sale, pays cash and puts it in the name of an entity or a trust, that's going to be reportable. At least that's how we're looking at it now, unless FinCEN comes out with some rules and it, wants to tell us something differently, which could happen 6 months or a year from now. I don't know. But as it stands right now, we think it is reportable. Okay, here we have a question. Husband and wife purchase a residential property for cash and title the property in their family trust. Is this reportable? So they're not buying it in their own names. They want it put in the family trust. Yes, it's a residence. It's transferred to a family trust. And if they paid cash for it, it's going to be reportable. Question. Husband and wife get divorced. Wife is awarded the residence in a divorce. Husband executes a deed to the wife, transferring the residence to her corporation. She doesn't want it in her name. She wants it in her corporation name. Is this reportable? No. So this is an example of a court-authorized transfer. The court is involved. There's no duty to report. Same with probate. If the probate court orders a residence sold and an entity buys it, it's not going to be reportable. Here we go. Entity buys a property that has 4 apartments and a duplex. Is this reportable? Because remember, for apartments, four is the limit, right? 1 to 4. So this has 4 apartment units and a duplex. The answer is yes. It's got more than 4 units, so it's no longer considered a residence. And they were paying cash and it was being transferred to an entity. So that would be reportable. Mom transfers her residence 50% to her daughter's trust and 50% to her son's LLC. Is it reportable? And if so, how many reports? Answer: if it's residential real property and is transferred to both a legal entity and a trust in the same sale or gift, both transferees would need to be reported in a single report. Question: Grandma transfers an apartment building 50% to her daughter's trust, 25% to her grandson's entity, and 25% to her granddaughter. Is it reportable? And if so, how many reports? So this is a resident. It's an apartment building. It has less than 4. So it's a resident, and it's, I think it's a gift because they're not talking about any money being paid. So it's a gift going to an entity, a trust, and then just to the granddaughter. So how many units in the apartment? If it's not over 4, it's going to be, if over 4, not reportable. If it's under 4, reportable. So as long as at least one of the transferees in a given transfer is an entity or a trust, the transfer may be reportable. However, the rule only requires identifying information about the transferees that are or an entity or a trust. So the transfer to the granddaughter would not be reportable, but you'd have to report on the other 2, and it would all be contained in one single report. Residential property sold for cash to an individual who titled the property in the name of his IRA or in the name of his custodian or trustee of his IRA. Is this reportable? Yes, an IRA can be a transferee trust. I had one come in yesterday as a question. It was the Catholic Church was buying a residence and they were paying cash for it. And it was going to be in the name of, I guess, the Catholic Church. So they said, is this reportable? Well, the Catholic Church is a corporation, right? So it's an entity. Now it's a nonprofit, but FinCEN doesn't talk about that. It's so, even though it's a nonprofit, it is still an entity. Entity paying cash for residence, yes, it's going to be reportable. There was no exception for the Catholic Church in the list of exceptions that I gave you. Question: residential property sold to a little old lady. Lender is a hard money lender, reportable to FinCEN. Let me turn that on. Let me just say first up, whenever you have a transaction with a little old lady using a hard money lender, that's always questionable. I always suspect there might be fraud or something involved because little old ladies typically use, B of A or Wells Fargo or something like that. But here we have this little old lady using a hard money lender. Answer: yes. Private lenders or hard money lenders transactions are reportable to FinCEN. If a lender who is financing the transaction with a mortgage does not have an obligation to report transactions under FinCEN, the transaction will be considered non-financed and the settlement agent will have a reportable transaction. So again, but if they have that NMLS number, it might not be reportable, or if they have an AML department, it might not be reportable. But typically, private lenders or hard money transactions are going to be reportable. Okay, same scenario, but the hard money lender does have that NMLS number. Is it reportable? No, they do not have to report it if the hard money lender has an NMLS number. Do you ask for proof of this NMLS number? Yes. And you get to believe them when they say they have one. You can look it up yourself, or you can just have them send you some sort of form, whatever you use in your office. And he says, I certify I have an NMLS number. Question. Private lender, they inform you they have an AML department and they file SARs. Is it reportable? They claim to have this AML department, which is the anti-money laundering department. Answer, no, you get to believe them when they tell you they have the AML department. The transaction is not reportable to FinCEN if the private lender has an AML department and they file SARs. Again, you do get to believe them, but have them put it in writing. Question. Mom dies and her will is probated. Court confirms the residence to be deeded to the daughter. So she's not paying any money for it. It's non-financed. The residence is being transferred to her. Is it reportable? No. This is a transfer supervised by a court exception. And I should say here, if it was just deeded to the daughter, it wouldn't be reportable anyway. But if it was deeded to the daughter's entity, so I should have put entity. No, this is a transfer supervised by a court. And so it is an exception. Here's a question. Brad Pitt, a celebrity, pays cash for a residence and he puts it in the name of an entity or a blind trust. You know how celebrities buy a lot of property and they don't want their name on it because they don't want those tour buses coming and stopping in front of their home and, taking pictures. Brad does not want anyone to know he owns his house. Brad Pitt is the beneficial owner of the transferee entity, but he doesn't want to answer any questions. So what do you do as the reporting person? Answer. The reporting person may collect beneficial information directly from the transferee or from a representative. So he can appoint someone to be his representative as long as the person the information is collected from certifies in writing that the knowledge that they're providing is correct. The certification may be collected using a form of the reporting person's choosing. And you just, put it all in your file. You can rely on this information as long as you do not have knowledge of facts that would reasonably call its reliability into question. Question. Buyer is attempting to purchase a residence and wants it titled in an entity. Buyer's paying cash, but buyer refuses to provide any information about the entity. Buyer will not respond to questions. The 111 data points, they got to answer 111 questions. What do you do if they refuse? Well, you can, explain to the buyer that you're required to gather this information. You can tell the buyer you can't move forward with the transaction without the information. And you can tell a buyer that, now you may have to fill out a SARS report because his refusal to answer any questions could be suspicious to you. I mean, you don't want to have to say that, but it could happen. Question. Susan and Bill own residence A on which they have a HELOC. Okay. Susan and Bill use the HELOC, they take out the money to pay cash for residence B, and they title that residence B in the name of their LLC. Is this transaction reportable? Answer, yes. An entity bought residence B and it was non-financed. Okay. This is suspicious behavior to FinCEN. The lender who's extending the HELOC on property A, that lender is not a part of the transaction buying property B, right? There's no lender in the property B transaction. So this is an example of a buyer paying cash for a property, putting it in the name of an entity. So it's a non-finance transaction to an entity of a residence. So it hit all 3 points. Question. Buyer is purchasing a residence with cash. The transferee is a trust, and the transferee claims that they participate in the address confidentiality program. What do you do? Are you guys familiar with the address confidentiality program? It's all across the United States. Answer, FinCEN is mindful of the critical privacy interests protected by ACPs. Use the address that the state provided to the individual. So these are individuals who maybe they're being stalked by someone, or maybe they're victims of some sort of crime and they're in hiding. So those people belong to this address confidentiality program, and they are given, I guess, kind of a fake address to use. And so you get to accept their fake address. Question. You discover 3 months after close of escrow that you have a file that you should have reported to FinCEN, and you didn't report it. So what do you do? Answer, notify FinCEN about the error and then complete the report as soon as possible, and you should be good. And I should say, I didn't mention earlier, but people who don't file the reports, refuse to file them, there are fines. I think the first time, if they find out you haven't reported, it's $14,000. But if they see that this is a pattern and you're just refusing to file these FinCEN reports, I think the fine can be up to $250,000. So you do want to be mindful of that. So let me see if I can come back.
Pat, I think we lost you right there. I think you muted yourself.
There. Wait, here I am. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Okay, yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. So here we're back. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, Pat, I have a couple that have come to me. This is Marlena. I'm actually in the field, and I have a couple of questions that have come to me thus far in reference to how
is it reportable or not?
Right. And also what's the starting point? We're now in escrow. And what's the starting point? And is that an escrow responsibility?
Very good question. Yeah.
Typically it is. There is a cascade who reports first. And escrow is the first reporter, the settlement agent. But if they don't, I think title is in fourth place. But there are 7 levels of reporting. But typically it does fall on the settlement agent first.
Yeah, the settlement agent being the escrow company. The escrow company is initially the one that is responsible for reporting, Marlena. However, they can sign a designation agreement in which they ask the title company to do the reporting for them. And I see that happening a lot right now. I think we have about 50 FinCEN reports pending with independent escrow companies. So what they do is they sign the designation agreement with SoCal Title. They provide us some pertinent information concerning the buyer and the seller, and then we start that process. The earlier we start that process, the better, because at the end, if we do it at the end, it could delay the closing of the transaction. Because we are not close. If we are the designated reporter, if we are designated by the escrow company to be reporting, we will not close. And that's actually the federal law that we have the ability to not close, because once we close, everybody disappears.
That's right. And you can't get the information.
And you can't get that information ever. So yeah, we cannot close without having that information. So the earlier we can get this started, the better. So
yeah, I think that's another big question is the timeline, because my list agents are worried about when they're ready to close and nothing's been done with the entity on the FinCEN side. What does that look like? Does the buyer or does the seller need to be let know what the timeline is? I mean, there's a lot of different questions that I'm getting in regards to that.
Actually, there is a page added to the car, in at least that I know of in California. There's a page added there where it explains to the buyer and the seller what FinCEN is all about, and that they are required to release that information in case the transaction is subject to a FinCEN filing. Some of that information, I can show your group there how to get to that information that they can share with their buyers and sellers. But you're absolutely right. The timing is very important. We need to get this report going as soon as possible. Once the escrow company has signed that agreement with us, we submit the questionnaire to the buyers and the sellers, and then we get a clear to close, which we then bounce back to the escrow that, yes, we're clear to close from a FinCEN perspective. Of course, they have all their other loans and documents to close, but as far as FinCEN is concerned, we sent them a clear to close for FinCEN. Without that clear to close, we cannot close. So yeah, that's extremely good point. We don't want to delay the closings because the seller is not filling out their paperwork.
Right. Okay. Well, are there any more questions for me? Because I know you want to talk to your folks, and I'll get out of your way.
Okay. No, thank you. Anybody else has any questions?
Yeah. And remember, you can always email if you have a question. It's pat.pinto@wltic.com, which is Westcore Land Title Insurance Company. And I can answer your question. Okay, everyone, have a really good day.
Thank you, Pat.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Rob,
Pat.
if you don't mind, maybe adding to the chat Pat's email, that might be helpful to the team.
All right, let me go into the chat.
Are there any questions from anyone?
Yeah.
All right, there's Pat's email direct if you all have any questions. Or of course you could contact me.
Back to us.
Yeah, we also, SoCal, we have a FinCEN@sctitle.com, an email where you can send all your questions.
Wait.
That's FinCEN, FINCEN @sctitle.com. You can always send questions there too. We can forward you to, most of the questions we're able to answer, but in case we don't, we can always forward you to Pat or somebody else. I really quickly wanted to show everybody access to some FinCEN flyers. This is our website, socaltitlecompany.com. Somebody, who's that? Let me see.
I think you can mute everyone, Rob.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. For instance, this is our website. Let me show if you're looking to contact Marlena. If I can type Marlena. So that brings you to Marlena's website. You can email her, call her, et cetera, et cetera. Now, as far as the FinCEN is concerned, when you hover over resources and go to marketing flyers, there's a bunch of flyers here that are available to you. If you sort it by FinCEN, you got a bunch of flyers that are just related to FinCEN. Some of them are, this is the cascade that Pat was talking about. So I don't know if you can see that, it's pretty small, but it tells you who is the first in line to report, which is the settlement agency or the escrow company. This is a little flow chart that shows you if your transaction is reportable or not. It's kind of like gamified. So you can walk through that, and as long as you have answer all the questions, you follow the arrow, it will tell you exactly if your transaction is reportable or not. Here's some additional information, a bunch of questions that you may have concerning FinCEN, a lot of different situations. that are answered here. And then there is one flyer here for real estate agents specifically. If you look at that, it has just bullet points for your buyer and seller. It has some talking points here at the bottom, and it has actually live links for the buyer, and this will tell you exactly what your buyer is expecting from the FinCEN reporting. There's even a video here. You can click on that, and the video walks you exactly through all the questions so that your buyer knows exactly what to expect. The same thing here is for the seller. The seller has a lot less questions. I think it's 4 or 5 questions only. Remember, the FinCEN reporting is mainly triggered by the buyer. The buyer has to be an entity or a trust. So the seller is only a small part of it, but they still require some questions regarding the seller. And again, it has the little video here at the bottom that walks you through the questions that the seller has to answer. So yeah, this is a good place to go to if you have any questions regarding FinCEN. And if your buyer or seller has any questions, you can go just to our website, click on the links here for the flyers, and then go to the live links for the buyer and the seller. It will clarify exactly what it is that's expecting from them. Again, we have FinCEN at sctitle.com. We have an email. If you have any questions, any follow-up questions, or you're looking for these flyers and you want us to print them up for you, we have some that are personalized for Marlena, and I'll be more than happy to send those to you all. And that was my little spiel at the end.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate you
Yeah.
so much. Rob is our operations manager over at SoCal Title, REMAX family. So again, Rob, thank you so much for having Pat on today. And I'm sure if there's any questions, you guys could, of course, email, text me. Yeah, just any way you'd like. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Rob, thanks again for being here. And
Thank you.
we
Thanks
will see you
everybody
all
for
soon.
attending.
Thank you.
We
Thank you.
appreciate
Thank you so
everybody.
much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Justin.
All right, Marlena.
Thank you,
Just have a good
Justin.
day.
Everyone too.
Were you able to record everything, or you want
Yes,
me
I have
to
everything
send you a
recorded.
recording?
And then
Okay.
I'll share it on my channels, and I'll also share this website, this awesome website that you guys have as well.
All right.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate that.
Of course. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.